hit that record. All right, awesome. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are thrilled to welcome Lady to our class stage. He is going to be teaching us all about commercial real estate, valuing properties. Anything else that you guys have questions about, he will be able to answer as well. So Mike, if you want to kick it off, ready to rock and roll.
If anyone's on Zoom, hello. So the first formula that we're going to use, which is definitively the most common and the simplest, is something called the gross rent multiplier. And all you're doing is basically taking your annual income, so say it's $6,000 a year times 12 months, at $72,000. Okay, if that property is sold for $720,000, then it would have a 10 gross rent multiplier. Take the annual gross income, okay, whatever the sales price is, you're basically dividing it. So if it was 720 and it sold for 1.44 million, then it'd be 20 times the gross rent. So it's all the formulas are the same as multiplication tables. It's all memorization and stuff like that. There's nothing really complex. It's just knowing the stuff, but it's always division and or multiplication, and it's always simple, and you just have to memorize it. And then, the big thing is with the gross rent multiplier, you're going to go to a Hoboken, okay, or a downtown Jersey City, or say, Passaic, New Jersey, the gross rent multiplier, the fancier the neighborhood, the higher the gross rent multiplier. Build a 6-unit building in Hoboken is going to sell for a lot more than a 6-unit building in Passaic. So the gross rent multiplier for Hoboken is going to probably be somewhere in the mid-teens. And then if you go to Passaic, it's probably 11-ish, so gross rent multiplier fluctuates contingent upon the neighborhood. The fancier the neighborhood, the higher the gross rent multiplier. Okay, and it's kind of the opposite with cap rates. Okay, that's kind of the next formula. It's called the capitalization rate or the cap rate. And basically, all you're doing is taking the income of a building pre-mortgage. So you're going to be your taxes, your insurance, your water, sewer, your heating bills, possibly, all your expenses without the mortgage. So if your building makes 100,000 gross, your expenses are 30,000 and your net is 70, right? And we sell that building for $1.4 million. Okay, it's this division, okay, and then it's a 5 cap. Okay. Is everybody comprehending what I'm saying? I just want to make sure it's easy to me, so I don't know if you guys comprehend what I'm saying.
Right, so you said the net income pre-mortgage divided by the sales price equals a cap rate.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
And a
Right.
mortgage is never an expense.
For net operating income, it would be correct. For NOI, it would be. It depends on the formula. The gross rent multiplier is kind of simple stuff for actually the realtor to say, oh, that building's worth X. The NOI is going to be kind of more for a point of reference for the realtor, but also it's important to the owner. The gross rent multiplier is kind of, there's casualness to it, where the NOI is absolute. So the owners, the owner is going to be, or the buyer is going to be very interested in the NOI. Okay, so do we have any questions about gross rent multiplier or cap rates? I have it all here, like I wrote down the definition and then I have a bunch of stuff written on there that's going to show you, I tried to keep it simple here. And this pages within here, which are much more elaborate with the mathematical formulas to show it.
Can we get those sheets in front of us so that as we?
Sure, the only thing is, you can, yes, you can, it's just that there's a lot, so I didn't want to make 1,000 copies. So, yeah, I mean, if you guys want to pass this around, there's all different stuff, I just made 1 copy of each only because there's a lot of information.
Yeah, we'll make more copies of it. Mike, is everybody gonna take this and make some copies of it?
Sure, whatever you want, yeah.
No, take care of it.
He'll be back in a second. So the third formula would be something called cash on cash return, okay? Another simple formula, basically if you purchase a property for $1 million with a $250,000 payment, after all of your expenses, including the mortgage, okay, so you pay all your expenses, your taxes, your insurance, your mortgage, your water, sewer, your possible heating, you know, some sort of vacancy factor, possibly repair factors, you know, every expense manageable. So you got $100K in income, you got all your expenses, okay, and let's just say you had $25,000 left, okay, and you put $250,000 down as your down payment. That's 10%, so it's a 10% cash on cash return. Okay, you'll see it when I give it to you. It might be hard to remember. Your stuff is easy. It's just, it's multiplication and division. That's it.
Just a quick question, Mike. In some cases in a movement, I noticed that some of these commercial brokers actually do not add real estate taxes into the cap rate. So they're trying to cheat the sheet, in other words, make it look more profitable in a sense.
Yes.
So as another broker, you have to do your due diligence and get the details from this listing agent. How did you come about with this cap rate? Don't just take their word for it, correct? I came across a lot of agents skipping those real estate
Yeah,
taxes.
correct. And the only thing is like sometimes, you know, most of the stuff I'm gonna do is 6 to 10 units. So sometimes vacancy factors or repair costs, those are minimalized, especially the vacancy factor in the small buildings. But you know, once you start to get bigger buildings, vacancy factor is much more important. You know, repair factors are much more important, you know, so it depends on, you know, taxes are always gonna be included. But you know, real estate agent trying to be slick is not anything new, right? You know, so like.
Yeah, but like with any commercial deal, you know, I always request as much documents as possible because it's so tricky.
Right.
And sometimes it's not as straightforward as it wants to be.
Right, like I have people, if I do a 6-unit deal, if I send it out to 100 people, and I get 4 people interested in it, there'll be people, depending on their personalities, oh, well, there's no vacancy factor, there's no repair and maintenance cost. But then there are other people, these 6 units, like, they don't really care. But the bigger the deal, there's gonna be more intricate information to kind of be detailed, to be more, you know, I don't know, I guess, absolute. So we understood what cash on cash is, okay, you put $250 down, you pay all your expenses, including mortgage. You get $25,000 left, it's a 10% cash on cash return. I'm giving you round numbers, just because it's easier to kind of calculate in your own head, it's not always 10%, sometimes it's 8.26 or 12.9, okay? So the big thing is,
Before you go on, sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna touch upon this later, but are you gonna cover what the average percentage of vacancy you calculate in the deals?
vacancy?
Yeah, like, what do you know? I don't know if you're gonna cover it later.
Yeah, no, I kind of was just more in a casual way, you know, I think I kind of just, the way I explained it, like, yeah, if I were to sell a 20-unit building, the vacancy factor, especially from the buyer side, is gonna be much more of a prevalent
No,
thought.
how much would you calculate?
Oh, usually 5%,
5%?
5% is the vacancy factor, so we're grossing 20
Do you
Gs.
adjust it based on the units?
No, not
So
really, I mean,
5% whether it's a
correct,
floor
that's
or
kind of a
20?
common number, you know, you might want to do a little less in terms of a smaller building. But like you get a 40-unit building, like there's always vacancy,
Right.
you know, it's kind of
Even
staggering.
at a smaller unit, I get a little bit more.
Correct.
Because one
Well, you
empty
could,
unit is a bigger hit.
yes, correct, 100%. The answer is yes, you could do it, but you could also be looking, maybe it's like a little too meticulous thinking,
Yeah,
you know, so it's not, there's not an absolute way, right or wrong to do it.
of course.
You know, it's just a more personal choice. If I was buying 4 units, the vacancy factor wouldn't be that big of a deal to me. If I was buying 20 units, I'd be a little more putting that into the calculation.
Right.
You know,
Makes
but you're right in the sense, yeah, 1 out of 3 units is 33%, 1 out of 20 is 5%, so it's a bigger hit from the rental income standpoint, but you start to do that stuff, you can start to convince yourself there's no good deals, right? There's no vacancy factor, and there's no repair cost, you know, this building's worth $18 and I'm paying $600K, you know, like, so it could be a little bit, you know, mind altering in a bad way. So, you know, gross rent multiplier, just to kind of go back, the big thing is the better the neighborhood, the higher the number. Hoboken's 15, 16, Patterson's 9 or 10, okay? And then cap rate is the opposite, Okay, the lower the cap rate, Hoboken's gonna be a 4 cap or something like that, whereas Patterson or Passaic is gonna be a 7.5 cap or something like that. So cap rates and gross rent multipliers are kind of almost inverse of each other. Okay, and then cash on cash, we did is kind of division, all income minus all expenses. What was your down payment? That net is a percentage of your down payment. 250 down, 25 return is 10% cash on cash. Return on investment, ROI, okay, so this, I'm just gonna kind of have it say it to you the way I wrote it down. So if we have a purchase price of $1 million, okay, a sales price of 1.2, okay, you bought a building for $1 million, you're selling it for 1.2, okay. You divide the profits by the original investment cost, okay, so it's $200,000 divided by $1 million. You made $200,000 on the property. The original purchase price was $1 million. It's a 20% ROI. So it's all division and multiplication. That's what you're always doing. It just depends on the formula. Okay. Any questions?
Do you have a pro forma? You use, when you do your deals, you
Yes.
have a pro forma, like you just type in your numbers? Or you just-
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat casual about it, so like, you know, I won't be so meticulous, because I'll just say taxes 16, heat 4, water sewer 4, insurance 4, so. Yeah, I mean, the pro forma is more up here than on the piece of paper, but yeah, I mean, you can have a pro forma, I mean, that's probably more the professional and meticulous way to do it, but like. The expenses, like if I buy a building or something like that, or I was gonna sell a building. Sometimes I can be a little casual, like I probably want, if I'm selling 6 units vacancy, not that big a deal, I probably wouldn't include it. Whether I was selling it and or buying it. The repair costs, like you always have repairs on an annual basis, so you should probably have it 3-4% of the gross, something like that. You know, but yeah, the pro forma is great, and just in terms of, especially if it's a new client. And you want it to kind of look professional to say boom, 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 where it's just, you know, much more detailed. But the expenses are always your 4 main expenses: taxes, insurance, water, sewer, and heat, if you pay for it, you know. And then mortgage too, obviously, but that's kind of a given. Okay, so the next one, net operating income or NOI, okay, so it's annual gross income minus all expenses except the mortgage. Okay, so 100,000, taxes, insurance, water, sewer, heat, 30,000, your NOI 70. Okay. What else do we have? Those are, I mean, for me, those are definitively the 5 most common because they're the simplest. You know, but there's a lot of other stuff. There's, you know, 12+ formulas to kind of use to value stuff. But I think this stuff, especially with smaller stuff, you know, if you're selling the Empire State Building, then, you know, there might be something more meticulous to use, but 6 units in Passaic with $88,000 gross, these formulas are kind of allow you to figure out some sort of value somewhat quickly.
I think somebody's asking something on there. Or we. So the chat, I don't know if somebody on there had questions for you.
I'm not sure.
You click the chat on the bottom,
Oh, all right.
on there. Sorry. I have a question though.
Yeah,
So I'm just curious, and I appreciate how you differentiate like bigger, you know, just for units or just a 6-family. Curious, 'cause I've seen some people do it and some not. What's your opinion on calculating the vacancy and repairs?
I would, I mean, I don't have it in an absolute term, but if I were to answer, I'd be more prone. You're supposed to do.
Okay.
If you're selling something and you're helping a buyer, you're supposed to do it. But sometimes I feel like that stuff, repairs, you always have a repair, a heater bust, a hot water bust, you know, you need to do a roofing. So the repairs to me are much more relevant. But if your terms of, you know, professionalism, yeah, you're supposed to do the vacancy factor every time. You're supposed to do the repair cost every time. You know, sometimes, especially, you know, if you have some buyers that are really good, like those guys are pretty quick, you know, so that I think they're gonna be much more casual about it and or just kind of incorporated themselves. But yeah, I mean, you're supposed to, the answer is 100% you're supposed to do it, but if I was gonna buy something, someone said to me, you know, like net 65, and I didn't see a vacancy factor, for me as the buyer, it wouldn't bother me too much. I'd probably put a repair cost in there because I know they have, every building does.
Yeah.
You know, vacancy factor, you know, it's somewhat uncommon. You know, 20 units is common, but 6 units, 4 units, people that, you know, stay there forever.
Right, well, that makes sense.
You know, then if you're gonna kind of go towards the retail component of commercial real estate, and it's also a formula that you can use for, you know, like a new build home. But a lot of times it's on a price per square foot, especially if you're talking retail lease. You know, so it's not something that I really concentrate on, but if you're doing leasing in terms of retail, it's always gonna be the price per square foot. You know, as opposed to, I mean, the NOI is important if you're the buyer of the building, but you know, if you're gonna be the leaser, you know, the square foot, leasing, excuse me, the square footage is gonna be the price per square foot. Okay, you know, then what you and I were talking about, one of the dynamics, you know, if you guys, this is a company called Blackstone, it's a publicly traded company called stock symbols BX, if you ever want to read about it, but those guys who own that company or who run that company, like, that's the biggest real estate company in the world in terms of just knowledge and clout and power and just information and portfolio. So they're by far the biggest buyer of industrial land over the last 5 years. Blackstone's scooping up stuff in Kearney and Manhattan, because there's land, you know, there's nowhere to go. You know, so that's a much bigger, that's more kind of that fact is a little more just for a knowledge standpoint. I don't know if we're gonna be dealing with Blackstone or anything like that, but like, you know, they're just great people to know about. You know, there's names that are involved with real estate and or companies that are involved with real estate. Blackstone by far. There's the best real estate website, something called The Real Deal. Okay, The Real Deal usually covers New York, South Florida, and other components within New York, within America. But they always tell you the biggest stories. So The Real Deal comes out every day, you know, and it's, you know, just good to have, I don't know, a grasp or a little bit of information on just bigger stories, you know, so.
TheRealDeal.com?
Yep. What else? The other thing, a handful of other things, but it's more in the handouts because it's a little bit more formulaic, but like the other stuff I would say to you guys to know about is the loan to value and debt coverage ratio. You know, especially now because rates are higher. So people are, you know, gonna be charged to, you know, I'm trying to get a deal in Bayonne. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times it's 20%. Now, with the bank this guy's using and rates higher, bank's telling him he's gotta do 25%. His rate's 7.8. 7, I think, you know, 7 and 7/8, 7 3/4, something like that. He's gotta put 25 down. So the rates have gone higher, the down payments got higher. So, you know, just a loan to value and debt coverage ratio, okay? You know, and also I think like one of the things that's always, how should I say it, like definitively the smartest component of real estate, you know, is that you get 3 wins with real estate. You know, it's stocks are cooler and funner and all that stuff, but like real estate's definitively the smartest, okay? So you get income, you get appreciation of the building, and you get tax write-offs. Tax write-offs for real estate, like depreciation, they're fantastic, like, and it's all simple. You know, all that stuff is the simple component, you know. The headache of real estate is really sometimes dealing with pain in the neck tenants. You know,
People,
correct,
people, that's it.
correct. That's it. You're gonna have tenants that are a pain in the neck that you might have to go to court with and deal with headaches, but you know what? The real estate is the win. You got the income on 12 times a year, you get the appreciation and you get the write-offs. You know, real estate write-offs. You know, like, you should know this stuff, like it's important, like the government's made it like, know that information, you know it for yourself if you invest, know it for your clients, because like, you get to write off a lot of stuff, it's, you know, it's just very beneficial, okay, and then, you know, what else can I talk about here?
Do you purchase as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're purchasing the Bayonne one or looking at it as for clients?
Yeah, I'm 50, so like, you know, my first building that I bought in Bayonne was 01.
50 units?
50 years old.
Oh. Sorry.
But, you know, like the whole thing is, like I was talking to somebody, I think it was yesterday, I forget who I was talking to. But like everything evolves, you know, like when I bought in Bayonne in 01, you know, everybody thought, you know, I needed a straitjacket,
Yeah. It was
you know,
done.
because it was a bad area, you know, but the whole theory was, it's like, hey, guess what? You know, I was working in downtown Jersey City in the late 90s, so I kind of was there when it was kind of first starting. But Hoboken was already kind of established, but you know, I just talked to people throughout the time and you'd hear like, Hoboken was shady in the 80s.
Mhm.
You know, I know people, my mother's age who lived in Edgewater, they said it was like a ghetto one day, you know, but now Edgewater, Fort Lee, right, it's all fancy. So my whole theory was like, guess what, if it's on the water, it's got proximity to New York, it's got value.
How did you structure the deal?
Which one?
The Beyond one, the one that you said, the one that you mentioned,
Well, I bought it.
but you just bought it? Oh, you-
Yeah, I bought that building in 01.
Okay,
So I still have it, and I still chase tenants once in a while for rent.
and usually when you buy more commercial buildings, how many or how much you usually give as a down payment? Because I know sometimes you need to have certain amount to put it like for the LTV. With the mortgage company, they're gonna give you the money. So how much is?
I mean, standard answer is 25%.
25%.
Yeah, but you know, it depends, you know, sometimes you're gonna have to put more because you have, you know, there's always a story, it could be like you have to do a 1031
Mhm.
and you're gonna overpay, but then you know the appraisal is gonna be lower than your purchase price, so in that case, you might have to put
More.
40% down.
Okay.
You know, but the standard answer is 25 usually, that's the generic answer, but it's also a case by case basis, and in many ways, that's the same way with residential too. So,
And sorry, another question is.
yeah.
How much is gonna be approximately the rate when this commercial loan is basically the same as the residential, or maybe it's different?
It's usually, I would say, about 3/4 of a point higher, somewhere around there, half a point to 1 point.
Okay.
You know, it's gonna be based on the bank, your credit score, your income, the buildings, kind of, you know, numbers themselves and stuff like that.
And have you made any deals, like just buying the land and then build it up?
No, I mean, I always think about it, you know, I know people that do that stuff, you know. It's the smartest way to do it, it's just, you know, you got to deal with people, the general contractors, you know, and the carpenters and the plumbers and the electricians and the foundation guys. So it's much more of an elaborate process than just buying 8 units, you know, putting 30% down or whatever it is and collecting rent from day one.
And how many days when you do any type of deal like that, how many months does it take to make a closing?
You know, I mean, that's always gonna be a little longer. I mean, if you want the truth, I was gonna say like an average deal for, you know, I right before I came here, I did a nice deal in Cliffside Park and that was for cash. And that deal still took 110 days. You know, but if there's a mortgage involved, I mean, it's always a pain in the neck because, you know, there's just so many people involved and it's the leases and, you know, like, so they just, it's much more meticulous, you know.
So everything depends on the deal.
Yeah, correct. But the leases and just the dynamics and the valuation of the property is very formulaic, so. You know, the banks can be unintentionally a pain in the neck,
Mhm.
you know, so, you know, that's it, and then, you know, and then in terms of websites, you know, the real deal is gonna be in New York, and then South Florida, mostly Miami, and just, those are the big stories. Trump's gonna be in there, and just, big names that are involved with real estate, You're gonna just see what they're doing if you're interested. And then the local stuff is, the two websites I would tell you to go to are Jersey Digs. That's, Jersey Digs is probably the best one because it's kind of perpetual. And there's here, I printed these this morning, so I apologize. There's usually pictures that are involved, but when I printed them, it didn't come with the pictures. But that's news, there's 3 to 4 stories a day, so it's gonna be what's going on in West New York or Jersey City. It's predominantly, it's called Jersey Digs, predominantly Jersey City, but like, it's all Hudson County. It's all Hudson County, and not all, but Hudson County, because it has the most development, and it's kind of in the news the most. Here's the other one, and this, I get this email to me, but this comes out every Sunday morning. But you can log on or just go to this website and you can see all these stories. If you guys want to keep that one, that's called, what's it called? Grid, right? Grid Real Estate. That comes out every Sunday morning. And that Jersey Digs is, there's gonna be a new story every 6 hours. This happened in West New York, this happened in Jersey City. That's kind of a summarization. They're 2 different websites. But that's kind of like the main headlines of Hudson and or Bergen or kind of Essex or Passaic and stuff like that. Mostly Hudson, because Hudson is where, all the development. What else can I tell you? Does anybody have questions?
Yes, I do. I was waiting for it.
All
Okay.
right, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to pick your brain.
Yeah,
If you are to price this particular building, that's retail downstairs and office space that upstairs. In my opinion,
yeah,
but I'm sure you have a better idea, and that's why I want to pick your brain. In my opinion, because partially retail and office upstairs, it should be somewhere in the middle of retail price as well as office price, and then you kind of mix it up and divide by 2.
yeah, correct. You could still, in that situation, I would still, there's still like a casualness where you could use the gross rent multiplier. But also with those retail, like the way you're talking about it depends on the situation. If it's like a Union City bodega retail, then like those really don't have great value. But if it's gonna be like a Kinko and then, Dun and Bradstreet above it, then yeah, that is gonna be a little bit more elaborate to come to the conclusion. Depend on the retail. It's all the retail, bodegas, they're a dime a dozen, but Starbucks is a good client. So it depends on that situation. And also with office, like, this is a nice office, but I don't know like who the clientele is here, if anybody takes 4 stories, like, I don't know, Dun and Bradstreets are here, or Amazon, these are gonna probably be more individualistic tenants as opposed to whole floors. But, did that answer the question?
Kind of halfway.
Yeah, and also like if you had a building that you had in mind that you wanted me to look at, I would look at it. But
I would do that. Yes, please, let's do
all
it.
right, yes.
Only because I have the listing signed already.
Oh, good.
I need to market this property, and reason why I agreed to 3 million instead of 2.2 or 3-ish was because in my mind, I do have several buyers that are owner occupier, owner user,
Oh, nice.
who tend to pay more than the strictly building price, correct?
I don't know if I have a specific answer in my head in terms of a specific time that happened for me, but the story seems quite viable. Yeah, if they like it and it fits their profile, yeah, then it would be,
Rather than paying a rent, you
Correct.
become a landlord.
yeah,
so to
correct.
speak, And then you collect the rest of the rent from the rest of the tenants.
Yeah.
So this building has, I think the total combined office space and retail combined, it's about 6,000 square foot. And it currently has 4, 5, 6 tenants, and one's being empty.
What town is that in?
It's in Secaucus.
Yeah, that's gotta be a pretty good town.
Yeah.
6,000 square feet for 3 million. Yeah, so that's,
There's
that's a
nothing
simple
else in
formula.
it.
That's,
Right.
what is it, $500 a square foot, $50, I guess it'd be 500, my instinct to say, but maybe it's 50.
Yeah,
But that's a simple formula, 6 and 3 million, you know.
You said 6,000 or 16,000
No,
square?
6,000 square.
6,000 square. feet.
So if you know Secaucus, it's a very little tiny town where our downtown is only one block in radius. So it's right in the middle of the center of the town. So this is the reason why I value, I agree to the landlord. First of all, I want to get a listing. Second of all, I just, a buyer is gonna come later down the road and they're gonna beat the price anyway. So why would I upset myself right from the beginning? I did tell him, by the way, what the value should be.
Yeah.
And I agreed to accept, he wanted me to try at 3 million. I agreed to it, just so that I get something in the pipeline.
Yeah,
And then I
that's
can-
probably a tough comp, because I would imagine
Yes.
Secaucus, there's not a lot of activity to show, to compare that property. I'm meeting someone Thursday in Cliffside Park for 3 units, they want to, hopefully I'll get the listing, but that's an easy comp.
So this one's even tougher because it's not all office space, it's retail downstairs and office space downstairs. So how do you have to pull a comp from at least 10 miles in radius, office building as well as a straight mall price, and then you kind of present it to the buyer. This is what it was sold as a straight mall or as an office building. This building is somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's tough in the sense, does that spot have a lot of parking?
10, 11 parking space,
And-
which is rare for Secaucus.
Yeah, correct, correct, right. Yeah, I don't know Secaucus intimately, but the only thing I would say, those places are tough only because that building, those office tenants are gonna be kind of accountants and you're not gonna get someone who's probably gonna sign a 10-year lease and you're gonna,
We have the State Farm upstairs, we have Section 21 Peterson, where I used to work for.
Oh, wow.
yeah.
He's having a heart attack.
That's building.
The building you're
That's the
listing?
building. So this order, and then,
All day, yeah, man.
yeah. So Century 21 is having a heart attack, because I left them 5 years ago, and I took all my listings with me, 90% I took the listing, brought into KW. So him and I, he's not too fond of me, he told the seller straight up.
He's gonna love your sign.
Yeah.
So.
Century 21 downstairs.
I know, I was telling them, I'm sorry, it's gonna have my picture there too.
There's some
I
motion
wanted
you
to
can
get
go
there.
with it.
Oh, no. So, do you know any company who can install the signs?
Yeah, and actually fast signs right on,
Oh, yeah, I know
yeah,
that.
they're good.
Oh, yeah, okay, good.
I have another
Right there.
question. Talking about retail space,
Right,
is there a significant jump in value when you have like a permitted use for restaurant? Do you normally see that?
because
Like a
if the
high-
restaurant's a retail tenant, would that be more appealing to a buyer, having that sort of tenant?
Like, do you normally see like a higher price per square foot in rent for a rather than just retail, have restaurant retail?
My answer is possibly ever so slightly, retail is pretty absolute, to me, retail and especially office space, that dynamic because of COVID and Zoom, those values aren't nearly as intriguing, especially retail, because everyone's online shopping,
Right,
because Amazon, so retail, it's
I was just
wouldn't want a
thinking
retail
because
tenant that much,
my brother-in-law bought this property in Hawthorne, it's
Right.
commercial space. And the rent is relatively cheap, and I was wondering, well, if he takes the initiative to install a kitchen hood,
yeah.
which is, and the fire suppression system, would that get him a nice return when he goes to rent it?
I don't know, was it a restaurant before?
There was,
My answer would probably be no, only because you might get more for the restaurant, but it also could be quite much longer if you're just only, what's the word, advertising, right? You go to a retail spot that's 2,000 square feet, if you're only looking for a restaurant tenant, it could take a long time, right? So not necessarily the way I would think, but also with restaurants, you could have a lease, but restaurants definitely, because of the overhead, that's a business that could easily fail much quicker than something else, you know, the restaurant's great, has great overhead,
Right.
you know, so then that
I
tenant.
just thought of it because I have another family member that rents another space for commercials, you know, rents a commercial space for his restaurant. And the price per square foot is astronomically high compared to
Yeah,
the
correct.
office space across the hall.
Yeah, no, I get it, correct,
So-
I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, yeah, I mean, it would depend, yeah, I mean, the town, but yes, it's just, it's probably more upside and more downside.
Right.
That restaurant goes out of business and you try, you know, there's a million retail spots that are just vacant perpetually.
Right.
You know, restaurants like, that would be on my not to do list, like, I would not want to own a restaurant, own a real estate, much safer, much more boring.
No, I was thinking like as a landlord, like if you own the building, if you install the kitchen hood, can you get more? for
Yeah, you
rent?
probably could, it's just, it's an
It's
exclusive
just,
list,
you're right.
you know, it's
So
an
you have to go to the
exclusive
city,
tenant.
get the variances and everything.
You do got a question
It's just permitted
on the
use.
chat, you click the chat,
Not a variance, just
no,
permitted
right,
use.
he asked about how to determine the rent on a vacant.
Ah, sorry, I'm looking at that woman's face. Yeah, I mean, that's just gonna be the price per square foot. I mean, you could get a comp on something like that. You know, you could check I mean, that's my best answer is like, that's just the price per square foot for the office, or especially the retail. I mean, it is also for the office. It's just that retail is gonna fluctuate a lot more because office space is kind of boring and abundant, so it's not really in demand, so that price isn't gonna be fluctuating as or high. You know, retail is gonna be much like what it was like the gross rent multiplier, you know, retail in Hoboken on Washington is gonna be way more than retail in Secaucus, I would imagine, you know, so.
Let me ask you something, similar to what he's saying, except this is actually occupied, but it relates. So I was looking at 8 units here in Rutherford, and I didn't get it, but I put an offer on it. One of the units was a liquor store. And I know another liquor store that I actually wanted to buy in town here, and he's paying $5,000 in rent. The liquor store that in the 8 units was paying $3,000, and they had a 12-year lease. And I was looking at comps and stuff like that I could find, and you really can't find much because it doesn't, you know, in Park Ave, you don't get a lot of vacant, like if you're not getting, you know, so much turnover, so much
Right.
frequent turnover. So I was wondering like how you would go about, you know, to me, I felt like, hey, I know this guy's paying $5,000 for his liquor store that he's renting, and here's another liquor store, very similar in square footage, and they're paying $3,000 on the same street, and the $5,000 is actually away from the train station, where the $3,000 is right next to the train station. So I was trying to think like justifying like how you would calculate rent like that, because like he said, in commercial, you don't always see turnover. So then I guess the answer would then be is price per square foot is,
Yeah,
that's
for the
it.
most part. And sometimes, you know what, maybe that liquor store, when they went in there, like that guy had a long-term vacancy, and he just
Somebody
was,
wanted to get in, I mean,
he
Yeah, they
he signed a kind of, you know, doofus lease, you know, it was great for the tenant, but bad for the landlord. I mean, that happens a lot with retail. You got a vacancy for 9 or 10 months, like you can become desperate. That's why like, you know, I'm pretty, what's the word?
Against,
Boarded in, like I don't buy retail.
right?
I'm not saying I'm a
That's
template for
right.
what to do and what not to do. I'd much rather have 8 units. You get a vacancy in an apartment, you know, you fix it up in 2 weeks, you'll have it rented in
Right.
a month. You
No, I'm
know,
the same with you. I keep dabbling, I have rental units and I keep dabbling getting into commercial, but I really think it's just because I've never really done it, like commercial meaning retail space and stuff. I have unit size that considered commercial.
Yeah.
But they're just residential apartments.
Yeah.
So I keep like pushing myself like, oh, maybe you can because you can kick them out quicker if you have an issue, you know, whereas with tenants, you can't kick them out as quick. But then at the same time, I don't know it or understand it, so I've been still, that's why I came to this class, was to understand like, should I just stay in my lane or
Yeah, no,
expand?
I would always stay, my thought processes are always pretty simple, like, people always need somewhere to live.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not saying, it's probably oversimplifying it and so on and so forth, but like, that's just why I stick with res. Like, I'll have a vacancy November 1st, I'll have a guy come in, he'll be done by the 10th, I'll have it rented by December 1st, like,
What's your cell, man?
201-786-3559.
Awesome. I appreciate everything, man.
Yeah, no problem.
I got a listing appointment, but I do appreciate your time.
Yeah.
It was good.
You know, here also, if you guys, I didn't make copies, I just had so many papers, if you wanna pass this around, like, this is, just as an example, I mean, I got that from the owner, but this is a property that that he wants to sell, you know, it's overpriced, but he sent that to me, but that's a pretty good kind of like pro forma, whatever you wanna say, that gives you all the income and all the expenses, so that's something, that's a good example of what you could have written up. If you guys wanna make copies, please do. Anybody make a
We'll go ahead and
copy?
email everything, I mean,
Yeah,
that papers.
but that's a good way to write it up, because it's pretty meticulous. You know, that's gonna give you, yeah, go ahead.
I have another question. How can you qualify this type of buildings? Like, for example, I know it's gonna be ABC, based on that, but when you trying to compare, like, doing comps to see the right price to buy, like, how you manage that? Like, for example, there is a building that is class B, but there is another one, class C, but they have like.
The only thing I would say to you is like, with the class A, the class B, and the class C, the thing I would keep in mind is like, those class of buildings, this is a class B building or whatever it is, like, it's big, you know, like, class A and class B and class C and all that stuff. That's probably not gonna be like, if I'm looking at pretty much anything I look at never has a class, you know, it's
Okay.
20 units, it's 8 units, so like, you know, it was a 24 unit, brand new building, you know, built in Jersey City downtown, yeah, you could say it's a class A, but the class A, class B, class C, like, that's a much bigger building, this is a class B or a class A, whatever it is, you know, like, those classes deal with much bigger projects.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll go around, what else did I not cover? I did cover. Yeah, and guys, please just come up and take, you know, take this stuff, make copies, you know, I mean. I don't know, I mean, I'm probably going off the tangent a little bit, like, you know, like the last thing I would say, or, you know, more questions, like. I don't have to do with Bitcoin, but it has to do with interest rates and debt and inflation, like. You guys, anybody following Bitcoin or Ether or anything like that?
Yeah, Bitcoin's low right
Yeah.
now. I haven't checked in a few days, but last time I checked, it was going down.
Yeah, well, it's 19.5 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, like, whatever, I mean, this is more an opinion stuff, like, I like that stuff, like, I believe in Bitcoin and Ether 100%, you know, because there's so much debt in the world and they're not gonna solve the debt and it's gonna increase. Inflation, you know, it's like, inflation will kind of taper off, but like, it won't go back to where it was, like, prices just go up through time and debt goes through time and they don't solve it. So, I mean, you know, I don't know, I'm just kind of like going off on a tangent, but I basically, because, you know, everyone, the correlation would be, because we're involved with real estate and interest rates are higher, like, there's always an outcome to stuff. So, you know, I think interest rates being higher, debt being higher, and inflation being higher, like, those cryptocurrency to me is a no-brainer. You know, doesn't mean I'm right. Can't sue me if I'm wrong, but, you know.
I was gonna ask, how do you track down owners of commercial properties that are on their LLCs?
Yeah, because I go on the tax record, you know, I have a few in my bag inside there, but like. All properties have zoning, so a condo through 4 units is gonna be an R2 zoning. 5+ units is either gonna be a 4C or a 4A, like this building's a 4A. Industrial stuff is gonna be a 4B, so if you go to tax records, and then, you know, if you go to tax search, and then property type, which is gonna be a 4C. You could go to Rutherford, and then you would see there's probably, I don't know, 25 buildings, 30 buildings in Rutherford
Right.
with a 4C.
Right.
Then you print out that tax record and
But the
half
tax
of
record,
it,
sorry, I was gonna say, the tax record only gives me the LLC.
yeah, correct, but sometimes, more times than not, yes, it does. But the two things I'll tell you, usually a transfer from a name to an LLC, so if you see ABC 123, you know, D transfer in 2021, but there's no amount, see the name before it, I mean, all that person did was transfer out of their personal name into an LLC, it was not a sale, so you could still see the name. And or Here, give me one sec, I'll show you like a piece
So
of
there's a
paper.
place called Prospect Now, if you join that. What it does is that based on LLC, it's gonna give you who's the contact person, is, and his email address and stuff. Prospect Now. It's gonna cost you, yeah, it's gonna cost you about 200 a month, more or less, I found out. I finally joined it because it's without it, there hands ahead of time, you wanna go out to some properties and you can, but now,
Here.
Prospect Now.
There's a tax, I'm trying to, maybe you can show that around.
No, yeah, that.
But see,
sorry,
see
no.
there's two addresses on there?
Right,
If you
Right.
see that second address is the owner's address.
Right.
So you can go on the tax record for that county, type up that address on that that property, that's George and Francis Lucas.
Mhm.
So you understand how to do it?
right,
That's all I would do there, I think in
but how
Edison.
do you get their phone number?
Then I used to have pay for white pages, which was like,
White pages?
but then there's something called True People Search. Yeah, which I used to pay like $80 a month for white pages, but who's kind of the tiny.
Sorry.
People are just so scary.
You search for the experience.
You always sitting in here, I haven't seen him.
I don't know.
He told me, my True People Search is free, and it works just as good as white pages, are a pain in the neck. Hold on.
You got it.
Oh.
Okay,
Search.
okay. True? But you have to pay?
No.
No, it's right.
Hey, if it's free, we should share it.
If it's
Yeah,
free,
this
it's
guy.
free.
He gave it to me.
Copy of that.
Yeah, he gave me that. You know, the big thing is like, I think, I don't know, maybe because I've like, my family's always talked about real estate, so I'm a little bit used to it and stuff like that, like, this stuff's not hard. Like, it's just not, like, it's just, I don't know, I always look at it as like times tables, someone with 9 times 9, you know what it is, what's 6 times 6, you know what it are, what's gross rent multiplier, you know what it, it's all memorization. That's it, and you just gotta know, cap rates are lower in fancy areas. And gross rent multipliers are higher in fancy areas, so it's just, but it's all memorization, it's not hard. It's not hard, it's just simple memorization, but the thing I did, there's a lot of formulas. You stick with these formulas, everyone should, once you get a copy of the kind of format of what I talked about today, please take it. It's all simple. And the big thing is, if you're interested in doing real estate to own it. I think a lot of times people just don't want to be landlords and deal with BS. That's what you gotta deal with sometimes, BS, but like the properties, that building that I bought in 01 in Bayonne, when everyone said, go, double dose your Prozac, like, now they're telling me,
Great job.
right, correct. Now I got a lot of.
Smart move back then.
Correct, but they're all smart moves, you just gotta buy it and hold it and you deal with it, it's like Microsoft stock or Apple stock, right? If you bought Apple stock, right, and you held it for 20 years, it's not that genius.
Look at Amazon. They
Correct.
were losing so much money for so many years, 10 years, I think. they were
Right,
losing
correct, right,
They're
but he
all
scooped up a bunch of companies and now he's this, quasi monopoly and, and he's flying into space with this
money.
new girlfriend, right? So, but this stuff is simple, real estate, the formulas, owning it, sometimes you deal with stuff where you get income on a monthly basis, you get appreciation through time, and you get a lot of write-offs. Like, there's nothing like it. It's not like, you don't need 12 degrees from Stanford to figure it out.
So my last question to you, I know it's probably has to do with the mortgage, commercial mortgage broker.
Yeah,
But generally speaking, in my mind, it's this particular building, going back to that $3 million one.
yeah,
If the owner user, for instance, there's a vacancy upstairs office space, if they want to buy it and set up their own business, can it be qualified for SBA loan since it's going to be an owner user?
I'm not the best with that stuff, I think there'd be banks, I don't think it's a generic answer, Like banks are gonna have different programs, if you don't, you call a couple banks and or,
I think that's how I understood it.
You know.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's owner op,
Yeah.
it could be SBA,
Right.
or it could be rent replacement as well. It
Right.
could be just regular commercial for rent replacement, so that's another option that you have. We can talk about it.
So
Yeah.
what would you do, how do you go about advertising, marketing this property? I mean, besides going to LoopNet and all that. What other sites would you go and market in? I'm really picking.
I mean, listen, you can use social media, like,
Right.
the thing I would do with that property. I mean, two things I would be doing. And I hope this, like, I wouldn't be too optimistic it's gonna sell, so I would kind of try to be like, because of the pricing. It's too ambitious, the sell side,
Yes.
so. I definitely kind of be making sure, send them any information you can, ultimately you get the pricing down, because that's when you're gonna sell it. But in terms of the advertising, with Sea Caucus, I mean, I would look, you know how to check a tax record where you went to 4A. If you go to Hudson County, type up Sea Caucus, go to property 4A, and then sales dates and say 01/01/20. See anybody who's bought anything big, especially on that street, and then track that owner down, and I would call them, that would be the best way, but more importantly, that property is that pricey, more than, that stuff is secondary, because even if you find the buyer, you don't know if you're gonna be paying what you're selling it for.
They're gonna have to pay premium price.
Correct. And it doesn't, more than likely they won't,
Right.
especially with higher interest rates, that if double in 6 months.
Do you have space for a banner?
I'm sorry?
Do you have space on the building for a banner? Big banner?
Yeah, what I was thinking is having the fast sign, it's a good company, I've done it before. I think it was a 6-foot sign that I put it up on the 7th floor. So hopefully they can do that, and trying to get a key from this Century 21 office. Maybe you should come with me. I need a bodyguard. Okay, so we'll go and grab a key, so that's what I need to do. I'm gonna put, it's a corner building like this, so I need a 1 for sale sign, for lease sign. So this way, they know there's some empty space there. He's got a.
How many
office-
units is it? 6 in total?
So he's got an office space, the vacant one. He has it listed on the Century 20 Peterson, so I told the owner, no, call him up and say he's gonna have to unconditionally withdraw the listing, so I can start marketing it. The second floor. But anyway, he had the listing since October 21. So, and there was no full rent sign. He put this size, a full rent sign on the window. Like when you drive by, you really can't say, this was the sign. So I took a photo and sent it to the landlord. Do you expect to rent the space with the size sign? And I said to the big. I know what you mean. So you gotta go out to absentee owners. Absentee owners are very, they value your opinion, so you're gonna have to give them value to these absentee owners. Reach out to them from time to time.
As in owners who are not very present in the business, how do you?
And they live out of state,
Oh, okay, okay.
so they have no clue what's going on here. For instance, this owner lives in Florida. I track him down ever since I left that Century 21 office. Because I knew that building was like a gold mine, it's a prime location. So I did all these Prospect Now, and of course you have to pay it. So one of them was this owner, and I reached out to them, and the cell phone was the correct information, email was the correct information. So I introduced myself, and I did actually meet them when I was in Century 21, so I introduced them, because I'm the only Oriental woman there, so it's not like they're gonna get confused. Remember the one Oriental woman saying, "Can you not remember you?" I said, I'm that person, by the way. If you ever come across thinking of selling or leasing it, always think of me. Can you call him first? And then he's in my database, so whenever I send something out, he knows I'm active in the market. So you're building a relationship. It took 4 years, by the way.
And there's also a service you can pay for, so you can.
Not Prospect Now.
There's different, a whole bunch of different ones.
Yeah.
I'll give you a whole list of absentee owners.
So Esteban, do you participate in Prospect Now?
No,
Okay, so it's about $200 a month.
okay,
It gives you all the absentee owners as well as the LLC.
okay,
It'll tell you who's the point person is of that LLC. His email address, his content supplement, so it's very accurate. So I just joined it, I started last month, but I didn't get into tap into the measures.
okay.
So, yeah, I'll share that information with you.
Yeah, please.
Because I really picked their brain and I need them to the demo in front of you. Sorry, Mike, I'm taking over.
No, I'm gonna show you something. Like this property. This guy bought this property. It's in an LLC, right? See, 7, right? But he transferred, there's no money. So this guy still owns it with his wife, but they transferred it to that LLC. So you type up that guy's name. He lives in Weehawken, right? You
Not,
I do the letters, so I do like 500 letters a month, and I just always send to the mailing address.
know, I've done
But I
that.
wanted to do like one more thing besides just sending the letters, I'm like, hey, you know,
How
that
do you
guy
send
is.
them a letter?
I have my wife right now. Well, no, we print the letter, but we handwrite the envelope.
Okay, got it. That's great.
Yeah,
Because a handwritten letter is more excellent.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And now they have those letters that you can get printed at any state.
Don't forget
You
your
sign the
name.
letter.
Yes, I've seen that too.
Right, I do the envelope, I have my wife do the envelopes, I get for 500 letters. I
Mike,
get
thank you
about
so
two
much,
calls.
Of course.
Yeah, you got it.
Information, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mike.
no problem. Thanks for coming. If you guys have my number, it's all simple, please, like, you just gotta get used to it, like riding a bike or something like that. You know, you're not used to it, once you do it, it's
Thank you.